Hello, we're now going to be looking at how we use SQL SELECT across two tables, which is a little bit trickier than using it across one table, because if I've got a relational database and I've got two tables, they should be connected somehow using key fields. We've talked about two keys so far. The primary key, which probably in albums is going to be ID, and in songs is probably going to be ref. We've also talked about the foreign key. Now the foreign key is what is essential here to be able to join up the correct records when we're using select across two tables. So the foreign key is what is really important here. So if we're looking at albums and songs, we've got a list of albums here. Obviously an album has got multiple songs in it, and so we can see, for example, Betty and Exile are both part of Taylor Swift's Folklore album. How do I know that if I didn't know about Taylor Swift? Well, because the foreign key here is ID. The foreign key is a primary key in another table. So the ID is linking us to the albums table because both Betty and Exile have got a foreign key value of 1, which connects up to the primary key value of 1 in albums. Likewise, we can see Hello and Remedy are both part of Adele's album because the 3s in the foreign key field link up to the 3 in the primary key field in the other table. So this is a critical thing here. We can't join up the records unless I use the foreign key. Okay, let's use these two tables still, and let's find out some information which involves stuff in both tables, which is where it gets a bit trickier. So let's find out what the song names stored are, how many streams do they have, and what album are these in. So if you know how to do this with join, perhaps pause and have a quick go. But if not, join is a keyword we add to our select statements when we want to get information from two tables. There are other ways of doing it as well, but join is what you'd be expected to be able to use in the exam. So I've not really got an elegant way of showing you this apart from just to show you how this looks. Select and from, the two parts, are exactly as they would be so far. So select, we follow it with our fields we want. It asked for 3 things in the question: the song name, the stream count, and the title. The title refers to what album they're in, so if that's kind of interpret what the question is asking for here. But the select bit is perfectly standard. Under from, we, for now, are just going to list the first table name. You might be tempted to list both table names here, but that's not how join works. So we always list our first table here. Then we need to follow it with the new part, which is join. So the way join works is, you write the word join, then you write the second table name. We need that second table name so it knows where to look in this other table. So we write our first table name after from, our second table name after join. And then this last bit looks quite confusing at first glance. We write the word on, then we would do, in this particular example, albums.id is equal to songs.id. So first of all, this stuff with the dots for full stop, what does that refer to? Well, we use a full stop in this way when I've got two fields with the same name. So in this database, I've got two fields with exactly the same name, which is ID in albums and ID in songs. Now we know they are connected, that's why they've got the same name, but the database wouldn't be able to distinguish between the two unless we told it which table that ID referred to. So albums.id is saying, I'm talking about this column here. Songs.id is telling it to talk about this column here. So that's what that means. It's allowing us to differentiate between two fields with the same name. Because what it will be doing, it'll be going through each record one by one. It'll be looking at folklore initially. Then it will be looking in the songs table. Does the suburbs, does its ID match up to ID 1? No. Does Hello's ID match up to 1? No. Remedies doesn't either. However, Betty's ID in the songs table matches up to the ID we're looking at in the albums table. And it's doing that one by one, trying to match up a record in the albums table to a record in the songs table. And that's why the foreign key is so critical, so I can get only the records which do actually match up. In this particular case, when I run this query, I would get this result. It's joining up information across two tables, and it's only giving us the relevant stream count and album name for the song I give it. And that join line is essential because if I didn't put in join and I did something like this, the first bit is pretty standard. I might be tempted to list both table names after from, which you can do, but it's just not how join works. Something like this might be how you'd want to approach it, but unfortunately, because I'm not linking the primary key to the foreign key, I would get a bit of a nonsense answer. In fact, if I show you this in full, I would get just a massive, massive table. And you'll notice what it's doing is it just doesn't know which record connects up to the corresponding record in the other table. So if you look at this top few examples, well, we've got the suburbs 5 times. That's because I've got 5 records in the songs table. So the suburbs, confusingly, it's the name of the album, but also the name of the song. In this case, it's looking here initially. So it's getting to this record here. It's getting the stream count, that's no problem. But when it tries to match up which album it belongs to, you've not told it what the relationship is between songs and albums. We know the relationship is the ID column is telling us where to look. Without telling it in the query, it doesn't just know what the suburbs refers to. It doesn't know what album the suburbs is in. So therefore it's just trying every combination and giving it every combination. These are the different albums in the albums table. Only the correct one happens to be here, but it doesn't know that unless you connect up correctly using join and using the foreign key. Let's look at one more example together which uses 2 new tables. I want to this time find out who the teacher is, so their name, and what room are 12B IT in. Again, perhaps pause and have a quick go if you are just revising. So my first stage is to identify what fields I want, and the question is a bit vague, but when I say teacher, I'm referring to the teacher's name. So I want the name field here. I also want the room. So the room is in our second table, which is why we need to use join. And I also want to know, well, I don't need to get it, but I'm going to be using the other name field here to get that class code, but that's going to come under where a bit later. So I've picked this example deliberately because I've got 2 names in my database. They're not related to the primary key, foreign key, but I've just got 2 fields with the same name, which is name. So I am going to need to do the trick I just showed you, which is when I've got 2 fields with the same name, I need to make sure I precede it with the table name, then a full stop. So it knows which name field I'm referring to. So I don't want to select the class's name, I want to select the teacher's name, therefore I've got to write that out in my select line. The room is fine because I've only got one field called room. Then we go from, and I go with my first table name, which is teachers. And then we do our join, which is always the same format. We write join, we write our second table name, we write on, then we link up our primary key to our foreign key. In this case, teacher's code is in both tables. That is what I'm trying to connect up. And in this example, I've got an additional criteria. I'm not just getting every single teacher and a room. I only care about the teacher who teaches 12B IT. So this time around, I've got to add a where clause. You could add a where clause above join. The ordering in these last 2 isn't important, but I've put a where clause last here because I think I might forget about join if I'm not careful. I'd always recommend you do join first. But I've got a where clause here, and I'm linking up this name in classes to be 12BIT. That's a string, therefore I've got to have quotation marks. That should give me a very simple table, just one record, which is Mr. Brown, me, in F13. So that's how we use join in SQL. And one thing I'll just point out in case you are tearing your hair out trying to do this yourself, in some implementations of SQL, you've got to write the word inner before join to get this to work, because there are different types of join. So you might have to go inner join classes on and so on, with a space between inner and join. But in the exam, this is perfectly fine. This is what they will be expecting you to use.